On behalf of NIFTEM-Thanjavur family, I invite our chief guest, Dr. Shekhar C. Mande, to please deliver Dr. V. Subrahmanyan Endowment Lecture.
Thank you so much. I will share my slides first and then see whether the slides are visible to everyone.
Yes.
Then I will go ahead. I hope my slides are visible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Before I begin, let me place on record what an honor it is to be able to deliver the Dr. V. Subrahmanyan Endowment Lecture today at NIFTEM. Of course, all of us have known and read about Dr. Subrahmanyan's contribution to India. CSIR is particularly privileged that he thought of CFTRI and began the great institution of CFTRI in Mysore in the late 1940s. I'm also greatly honored that so many dignitaries I see here on the screen who are present for the lecture, and I feel a bit humbled that people like Dr. V. Prakash and all are actually present in my lecture. So thank you all so very much for giving me this honor of delivering the V. Subrahmanyan Endowment Lecture. I hope I'll be able to do justice to this honor that you have given to me. I intend to speak on food, nutrition, and agricultural challenges in the coming times. And what my emphasis would be essentially beyond how technology has always helped us in ensuring our food, nutrition, and agricultural challenges for time immemorial. In fact, it's not very surprising because the very aspect of life to survive on its own, whether be it bacteria, plants, animals, or even humans, is the ability to derive food from the surroundings and then grow, reproduce, and eventually pass on our genes to the next progenies. And that humans have done extraordinarily well in evolution is I don't have to emphasize that particular fact. But we look back upon the prehistoric times when we had yet not started forming colonies and other things. What we realize is that technology has always played a very major role in our ability to gather food and our ability to survive. And what I show you here is a tool that I accidentally stumbled upon during a trek in mid-December, in the Aravallis, very close to Delhi. What you see here is a classical Stone Age tool, possibly dated anywhere between 100,000 to 300,000 years old. So this is much before we started forming colonies. This is much before we had started domesticating cattle, and this much before agriculture came into being. Where essentially the population, which are hunter-gatherers, but the principal aspect, of course, was to go and get food from somewhere. And tools like this were made by humans, or as I said, time immemorial. And that's what the technology actually plays a role in trying to adapt ourselves to the surroundings. We also use our surroundings to our use and our benefit. And that's a hallmark of our race, the human race, for this. But as we go further, about 10 to 15,000 years ago, about 15,000 years ago roughly, is when we started forming colonies of human beings, more than about 200 to 400 people together, living together as a community. And that's also the time we started domesticating cattle, we started agricultural practices, and we actually began as an exercise making our own food so that we don't have to go and hunt and gather food from whatever available resources were far and off. That also led to a proper social structure, the evolution of proper social structure into human beings. And as I said, the first driving point of that social structure was agriculture. But as we started making colonies bigger and bigger, of course, administrating the colony and distribution of work to different groups of people for different things also became an issue. And the colonies started being administered either by a single individual, either a king or an emperor or something, or a group of people who would take decisions and then decide which kind of people would follow what kind of profession and so on and so forth. In the process also would attempt to protect interests of all the people in that society. And we once again see impressions of that in our modern agricultural practices. And that's how we actually evolved as a great race, which is very, very social race, but also we work with the nature and we have tried to use nature for our own benefit. As I said, agriculture being one of the central points in our evolution, it was but a necessity that we start using proper agricultural practices and make use of our resources for better production of agricultural products. And irrigation formed a very critical central aspect in this particular thing what I am talking about. In fact, there are records from Indian subcontinent that our ancestors in our subcontinent were routinely growing wheat, barley and jujube, which appear to have been domesticated about 9000 BC. We have very old records showing that we had begun domestication of sheep, goat and other cattle in the pre-Indus Valley civilization. In fact, the agricultural records from the historic evidences what we have, archaeological evidences what we have, is also that there were 2 harvests a year, a proper fallowing of land and irrigation system and so on and so forth. In fact, the example that I want to show you here is a dam which is one of the oldest dams still in use anywhere around the world, constructed on the Kaveri River near Trichy, and is a Kalanai dam. And this actually shows the role of administration in promoting our food, nutrition and agricultural security for our race. And in fact, the state supported infrastructure has always played a major role in the evolution of the human race. And a few examples of this I will also show you a little later. This is a very beautiful monogram on 18th century science and technology in India, written by Dharampal. And Dharampal actually records some of the historical evidences of how agricultural practices existed in India. And what he records is that the paddy production in a region where you are very close in Tamil Nadu at that particular point of time amounted to roughly about 5 to 6 tons per hectare then in the 18th century, which equals the production of paddy per hectare even today in the present day Japan, the current world high. And it shows in our subcontinent from the Stone Age tools to the paddy production in 18th century, there has been a continuous unbroken tradition of many people coming together and working for the benefit and sustenance of humanity. Even today, we continue to produce large amount of food products for the world. There was of course a period of about 150 to 200 years in between in which we were deprived of our own resources. But in the last 75 years, we have ensured that we have demonstrated literally the resilience of our people in coming back to the same old golden era of what we had seen till the 17th and the 18th century. Now these practices have continued, agricultural practices, and we should see the evolution of these practices in the modern era in India. And as I said, the dark ages of about 150 to 200 years in between made sure that we were deprived of all our resources, so much so that we even were not able to produce, when we became independent, our own food. We had started importing food from overseas. There's a classical example of a drought that is very often quoted, is the famine of 1943. The famine of 1943 was not essentially only because of the shortage of food, but a shortage of food arose because of also lack of transport from the food where it was available and it was not there. And a large number of people, hundreds of thousands of people, or rather a million people, succumbed to this famine. That only shows that at the time of independence, we did not have proper agricultural practices in place. We did not have self-sufficiency in food production. And in fact, a similar crisis when it loomed large in the 1960s, and we made requests to the United States that we would like to have import some wheat, and that's the genesis of what is now called as the PL 480 project, in which United States provided large number of wheat to us. But it was also the time that we became aware that we have to become self-sufficient in our own food requirements. Norman Borlaug had already germinated the seeds of green revolution elsewhere, and his work across the world was already making waves with the dwarf wheat variety that he had developed and implementation of proper agricultural practices, how they could be useful for adaptation across the world. And Indian Agriculture Research Institute in Delhi and Professor M.S. Swaminathan, with very solid support from people like Dr. Subrahmanyan, and others, ensured that we also stepped into the era of food sufficiency. And ever since we started this, India has not only become self-sufficient, but rather we are one of the major producers of all kinds of food in the country. In fact, the bar that you see here is we are among the highest rice producing countries in the world. So in a sense, the dream of our people that we should become self-sufficient again in almost everything has started becoming realized through these kind of revolutions that what we have. And of course, the Amul has been mentioned here, and CFTRI Mysore has played a very critical role in the revolution in the milk in the late 1970s and early 80s. And we are very proud that the role that CSIR has played in many of these revolutions. A much less appreciated fact about the Green Revolution is that even CSIR played a very major role in providing technologies during the Green Revolution. And as I said in my beginning comment, that technology has always played a very critical role in the growth of human societies around the world. And during the Green Revolution, as the Green Revolution was unfolding in India, CSIR also played a critical role in the mechanization of agriculture and in providing agri-pesticides to the country. And there what we see here, the first of the tractors that rolled out of CSIR's Central Mechanical Engineering Research Institute and eventually spun off as a company called Punjab Tractors Limited. And this played a major role once again in the implementation of Green Revolution across the country. The Swaraj tractor that was made in CSIR and eventually spun off as a company, and many of us read in the newspapers recently that it has now merged or rather has been taken over by the Mahindra Group. In the same manner, many agri-pesticides were made in CSIR labs, and CSIR has assumed a role of a leader in the chemical sector ever since. What I would like to present to you, and most of you would be aware of the thing that I am going to talk about, but nonetheless, in an endowment lecture such as this, it is important that we sit back and reflect that what challenges are ahead of us and how do we address those challenges collectively. It is imperative, as what Anand Ramakrishna mentioned, that during COVID period, the entire country worked together to address those challenges of COVID. And I should like to place on record that all the people of India, the scientists and technologists, the industries, the small and medium industries, the policy makers, everyone worked together to make sure, including our administrative machineries, to make sure that the impact of COVID was reduced on our population. And these 2 years have been really awakening years for the entire population of India, that what kind of miracles can be achieved when we work together. And similar challenges which lie ahead of us, once again demand that all of us work together in addressing the challenges. So let me take a few moments to list out some of the challenges which all of you are aware of, but nonetheless, if we introspect upon this, we can even do equal kind of miracles or equally good work as what we did in COVID times to address all these challenges effectively and make our country truly Atmanirbhar and 2047, as our founders of our nation had imagined our country to have its true position in the global order, we will be able to realize the ambitions and the dreams of our forefathers. So let me now actually go over to some of the challenges that what we face. One challenge that we face is meeting nutritional requirements of all. And when I say this, what I mean is that not only nutritional requirements of a special economic group, not only nutritional requirements in different geographic groups in India, not only nutritional requirements of different age groups, not only nutritional requirements of different gender, but as a whole, in a holistic manner, we must address nutrition requirements of everyone. The nutrition requirements would not only go in ensuring a healthy quality of life, but also it would actually improve the life of those who have disabilities in their unfortunate disabilities and many other aspects. And to do that, we must actually also ensure that wherever micronutrient deficiencies exist, like iron, vitamin A, iodine, or something, which are abundant in the country, we can start addressing them. They also address the nutrition requirements of those children who don't have enough food to eat, or those who are overeating and are obese or overweight. So all of this actually is one of our first challenges that what we must actually meet. Now we have about 1.4 billion population. The average life expectancy has improved dramatically post-independent, and today it is at roughly 70 years of life expectancy in the country. And we have a very interesting demography. About 25% of our population is less than 15 years of age. About 68% of our population is between 15 and 65. And about 7% population is over 65 years of age. We are also among the top food producers in the world. Now the demography is such that over a period of time, the balance is shifting towards older people. 30 years ago, it was not like this. And therefore, the nutritional requirements of different age groups must be thought of in the correct perspective, and we must make sure that as much emphasis is put on giving our children nutritional food, as much emphasis has to be there also on geriatric food to make sure that even our old population lives healthy and peacefully. Also, as I said, there are two major problems that I have mentioned a couple of minutes ago. One, that of undernutrition, and other of overnutrition. Now, undernutrition actually forms one of the sustainable development goals of the United Nations as was presented. And it says that we should be zero hunger by 2030. And this is actually one of the major challenges for India. We have a large population which is malnourished, and we have a large population to which we must reach out to make sure that the future generation of India, which is properly nourished and grow healthy. In fact, it's embarrassing for a country which aspires to be for its global order, its rightful place in the global order, that we still have a large number of undernourished children in the country. Intriguingly, at the same time, we also have people which are obese and which are overweight. And that is leading to another kind of a problem in the country, and that related to diseases such as diabetes and other lifestyle disorders. And all of this combined together leads to productivity losses about more than 10% in India. And therefore, the challenge one is to meet nutritional requirements for all populations as what I've highlighted till now. Challenge two is what we would actually like to, can I have the next slide please? I think this got stuck up, yeah. So as I said, undernutrition and overnutrition are both have problems. And we'll go to the challenge 2 now. And the challenge 2 would be to ensure sustainable food production and consumption. Now, how do we actually in our agricultural practices make sure that our practices are sustainable for food production and consumption? As I said, historically, there are many grains that have been grown here, especially millets, and a food which had high fiber content, fruits such as jujube. But over a period of time, we have moved ourselves from those into other kinds of food in recent times. The sustainable food practices or the food production also takes care of the carbon footprint of what kind of food can be actually met. And given the tropical weather conditions that like what we have, we must have crops which are weather resilient. And what fits in the bill very well in all of this are of course things like millets. As we know, millets have higher methionine and cysteine contents. They also have higher iron, zinc and calcium contents. And they are last standing crops, are believed to be last standing crops during drought conditions. And considering all of this, India impressed upon United Nations to declare 2023, that's the next year, as the International Year of Millets. And many agencies together, whether it's Ministry of Agriculture, ICAR and CSIR, also our institutes and all are working together of making the Year of Millet successful. One of the challenges in the food consumption and production is the supply chain management losses. Supply chain management losses are huge across the country and in fact across the globe. The supply chain which typically begins at the farmer's farm and then find its way through a complicated machinery either where the food grains are stored or through mandis and eventually at the end user's place is a fairly complex practice. And if you are not ready for the entire supply chain management of how to store food in proper places so that it doesn't go waste, how efficiently we bring it to the end user from the production side, we will not be able to solve the problem of sustainable food production for the future. And when we talk of supply chain, we also talk of a concept called a food mile, and I will come to that concept a little later. This also makes sure that the correct kind of food that we eat is also given to the end user or the person who consumes the food. And when we talk of correct food, the sustainable food production must ensure that the carbon footprint of what we consume must be as less as possible. And what I've shown you here in that bar graph is the carbon footprint of some of the produce which is very high. And are we ready to change our food habits to the food which has low carbon footprint and at the same time ensures the proper nutritional qualities of the food? And that's a question that we must ask ourselves if we were to ensure a sustainable food production for the coming time. A food mile, as I said, is a concept that is a very interesting concept that has been proposed. And it is the concept that defines the distance food is transported from the time of its making until it reaches the consumer. And as you can see in the graph at the right bottom corner, India's food mile is roughly of the order of about 250-300 kilometers. But in most other countries, it's much higher. Which means we are putting pressure on all our logistic supply chain management issues, including transport and other things, so that the food where it is produced has to travel long distances to people so before it is being consumed. Now this exactly is an antithesis or exactly opposite to the kind of concepts that even Mahatma Gandhi had proposed. Mahatma Gandhi's Swadeshi concept arises from the fact that whatever is produced locally ought to be consumed locally. So what we consume today, if it is produced in a nearby location, that allows the local economies to prosper and also allows the local people to get better yields for their produce. It also ensures peace and harmony in the society. And that's the base of Swadeshi. That also is the base of what today we call as Atmanirbharta. And therefore, we will have to ensure that we actually have as less food mile as possible also in the coming times. So agriculture produced locally ought to be consumed locally and not to be transported to very far off distances is one of the challenges that we will have in the coming time. The third challenge is the wastage of food that we see across the country. And in fact, I had a very pleasant surprise when I went to some of the offices across the country. As an example, when I went to Tata Consultancy Services, in their canteen, I saw there was a big basket which was kept and it was accumulating the food that was wasted on that particular day by the employees of Tata Consultancy Services in their canteen. And that's just one way of making everyone aware that wasting of food is not a very healthy thing to do. The wasting of food alone is estimated to be equivalent to about 3.3 gigatons of greenhouse gas emissions in the country. It also leads to surface and groundwater resources, depletion of them in the time. And it actually tells us that our biodiversity and expansion also is compromised because of the wastage of food. So all of it actually is a problem for the food losses, and it's one of our challenges for the future, that how do we minimize the food losses and ensure adequate food supply despite all of this. Next slide, please. In order to actually minimize waste food product, once again, the spirit that we had demonstrated during the COVID period, that the government, academia, civil society, private sector, we all need to work together and we all need to act with nature in this particular process. This will also ensure that we are using our natural resources optimally for everything. As I said, that greenhouse gas emission and use of water is one of the major challenges for the future. And I'm going to come to that a little later. But nonetheless, the minimum wasting of food would ensure that we use all our resources optimally for future. And that brings me to the point of water. And that is our challenge number 4, that how do we get ready for the future? And just to give you a glimpse of an article that has appeared in Nature this week. So those of you who saw Nature on 27 January would have stumbled upon this particular article. And it talks about a mega drought that saw wiping out of many civilizations across the world. From Mesopotamia to Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, we actually see that many civilizations were wiped out during this particular period because of a mega drought that swept across the world. Now that brings the criticality of water in our resource management for future. The drought is estimated to have hit roughly about 2200 BC and has wiped out many empires, as I said, from Mesopotamia, Syria, Iraq, and Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. And this kind of droughts are a reality for even today. This is not a fiction. They can come any point of time and in the most unpredictable manner. And we have to be ready for drought resilient cropping as what we can do. Over the last few years, over the last few decades, we have learned to use groundwater for our agricultural practices. But when we use groundwater, we have to remember that our water availability in our country has been depleting very rapidly. In fact, Indian National Science Academy had organized a groundwater resource workshop a few years ago, and it was so dramatic. It showed that in the year 1950, we were comfortably surplus in groundwater resources. By 1980, we had actually started becoming water short country, and it is estimated that by the year 2050, we are going to be a greatly water deficient country. And water deficiency is a reality that we are looking at. And to address the problem of water deficiency, we must ensure not only water is used very judiciously, but we also must ensure that we replenish the groundwater resources. It is estimated that about 6% of the GDP will be lost by the year 2050 due to water crisis. And about 40% population is at risk of having no risk to drinking water by 2030. So as I said, two important aspects of this: judicial use of water and appropriate replenishment of groundwater are both the things that we can do, and we can make use of technology once again for this particular purpose. And I would like to share with you a very proud example of CSIR technology. Now, this one is from the National Geophysical Research Institute in Hyderabad. When they mapped all the groundwater resources near Hyderabad, and the pictures that I show you are from a village called Chotuppal. When they did that, they realized that groundwater had practically been depleted in many areas around the village. But yet, there were aquifers that existed below the surface. And if these aquifers were appropriately recharged, that water would become available to the people again. And in April 2015, what had almost started becoming a semi-arid land, the NGRI people, having mapped the locations of aquifers below the surface, started appropriately generating groundwater recharging lakes or water bodies that would eventually replenish the groundwater aquifers. And today, when I went there about a few months ago, I see that people have started even growing paddy in the same land. Now, look at the extreme left. In 2015, just about 7 years ago, the land had started becoming semi-arid. There was no water, and many people from the villages had started migrating to the nearby cities, whether it be Vijayawada or Hyderabad. But today, what we see on ground, a few months ago when I went there, and I met all the village sarpanches and other people, we realized that people had started migrating back to the village, and not only that, they had started growing paddy, one of the most water intensive crops. And that has been possible because we have been able to replenish in an appropriate manner the groundwater resources. So if we address both the problems, the use of water and its conservation, this kind of challenges will be able to overcome in the coming years. And based on the success that what we have had in Hyderabad and in Telangana, we then propose to Ministry of Jal Shakti that we would like to do the same exercise across Rajasthan, in Gujarat and in Haryana, the regions essentially what we characterize as the desert, the great desert of India. And by doing so, if we are able to recharge the groundwater in these areas, I think we will witness a history in the making in the coming time. And the project has already begun. CSIR NGRI has deployed helicopter-borne survey of groundwater, or rather aquifer mapping in these areas. And if we are able to map the aquifers correctly, and if we are able to recharge them using rainwater harvesting or other means, I am very sure what we will have is a fairly historical matter, that this desert will come back to life and will come back to the same stage what it was centuries ago. The challenge number 5 and the last of the challenges that I would like to present to you is that of personalized nutrition. Now this is very, very futuristic. When we look into the future, our future has to ensure sustainable living. Our future has to ensure that our impact on environment has to be absolutely minimal, but our future also has to ensure that an access for every person living to all the resources is equitable. And in that sense, if you look at nutrition, also is a very personalized matter that we can actually personalize nutrition for every person depending on the person's ability. So what you see here in tier 1 is the daily intake of food for the person, but that can also be correlated to the phenotype of a person. If the person is fat, for example, then we need to give low fat food to the person, and if the person is malnourished, we must ensure appropriate nutrition. But the phenotype is also related to the genotype. So if you are able to integrate the daily intake of a food for every person, depending on the person's phenotype and the genotype, what we would have achieved is a personalized nutrition for the person. And I don't think that day is very far. Our understanding of the host immune system or the person's immune system, our understanding of host metabolism or human metabolism, and our understanding of the microbiome, a large population of bacteria that live in our guts, in our oral cavity, on our skin, has improved dramatically in the last 25 years. And with the knowledge of the human system, the metabolism and microbiome, I am very sure that the days of personalized nutrition are not very far away. And we, the science and technology community in India, and CSR in particular, must move rapidly toward that era in which we can actually start prescribing personalized nutrition to every person in our society. And I feel there are very exciting times ahead for people or the scientists in CSR for this particular purpose. May I have the next slide, please? So having posed the 5 challenges, I would just very quickly like to highlight that what kind of science and technology interventions that we have done in recent times, and how does that actually help the people, or rather our stakeholders, the common people. And just to give you 2 different examples, this example I have picked up from Navarangpura district of Odisha. As all of us are aware that the government some years ago declared a list of what are called as aspirational districts. And among all the aspirational districts in the country, those which had the lowest rank in Human Development Index was Navrangpur in Odisha. And it is at that time CSIR as a body decided that it can bring benefit to the people of Odisha or Navrangpur district of Odisha through our S&T interventions. What you see on the right middle panel as the water purification system that have been developed in IMMT Bhubaneswar. We distributed them at a very large number to the people there. What you see at the bottom are the healthy foods that were actually distributed to the people there, and the CFTRI scientists spent considerable amount of time in going and teaching people there to prepare healthy food products, whatever was available locally, and also made interventions in the midday meal schemes using ragi laddus and so on and so forth. And that dramatically improved the nutritional status of the people in Nabarangpur. The CSI's Aroma Mission also went there and taught people how we can make certain aromatic products from waste flowers or other aspects there. So all together, a very holistic science and technology solution was presented to district Nabarangpur. And since then, since the work began a few years ago, Nabarangpur has climbed up the HDI index very rapidly, and today it is no more a district which ranks among the lowest in the country as an aspirational district. And CSIR is extraordinarily proud that our scientists have been able to intervene and bring S&T interventions for the benefit of people in the Nabarangpur district in Odisha. Next slide, please. Yeah. previous ones. Similarly, the second example that actually wanted to give about S&T interventions, and as I said, that 2023, we are going to witness this as the year of millets. And this example I have taken from the CFTRI Mysore, and CFTRI is leading in the celebrations of the year of millets from the CSR perspective. So CFTRI has developed large number of different machineries for processing and making value-added products from millets. Some of the products are also bakery products, traditional products, convenience products, beverages, and so on and so forth. And in fact, they are not only making these products, but they are also preparing the next generation through entrepreneurship so that millets can be popularized across the country. In the beginning of my talk, I had talked about the produce that we make locally, that can be consumed locally, and millets actually qualify that particular definition perfectly. And we hope that through the interventions that CFTRI is planning in the coming time, we will be able to not only celebrate the year of millets successfully, we'll also be able to propagate the knowledge about millets across India so that people can start producing this kind of millet-derived products in the coming time. And for this, once again, I come back to the lesson that we had learned from COVID period, that if we were to able to successful in this endeavor, we must make sure that we connect with all the stakeholders appropriately, whether be it NGOs, whether be it the small industries, whether be it large industries, whether be it policymakers, whether be it state administration, our sister departments, Ministry of Food Processing or ICAR or FSSAI, state governments and everyone. If we are able to connect together with all of them, I'm sure together we can make a huge difference for our people in the coming times. Next 25 years, we must endeavor to do this so that by the time we celebrate 100 years of our country, we must make it ourselves very proud that science and technology has brought so much benefit for the growth of our society. So to summarize, what actually I have presented in my own opinion, 5 major challenges for us for the coming time. What I have been able to tell you is that the sustainable food production and a quality diet can ensure our nutritional security for future. If combined with proper agricultural practices, we will have quality nutrition and appropriate agriculture that will ensure our sustainable future. And if we combine with health, the triangle of nutrition, health and agriculture together can really make sure that India would achieve its proper place in the global order. All of it also would be cost effective. I have no doubt about this. But all of this also would be resilient to climate change and would be minimal on the environmental damage or destruction. Water, I have already spent considerable amount of time. I would just like to quote from Mahatma Gandhi once again. There are people in the world so hungry that God cannot appear to them except in the form of bread, unquote. And with this, our mission would be that no human should go hungry or malnourished. We should ensure food and nutrition security, at the same time ensuring environmental protection for future generations without any compromise on social, environmental or economic basis. So better production, better nutrition, better environment and better health and better life would ensure our appropriate place in the global order, and that not only India's place, but will bring a lot of benefit to humanity in general. I would like to thank all of you once again for giving me this particular chance and a privilege to talk about during the Dr. V. Subrahmanyan Mauritian lecture. Thank you all so very much. I feel extraordinarily privileged with this particular aspect. Thank you very much.